How's everything, Craig? Bob Lazari, Tony D'Angelo. Welcome to Monday Night
How are you,
Sports
Craig?
Talk.
Thank you.
Craig, let me just give a little bit of your background. We just said you grew up in Connecticut, grew up in Trumbull, All-State in baseball, soccer, an '02 Yale grad. Basically, you were drafted by Milwaukee in the 2002 amateur draft. Also pitched with San Diego, did some time in Boston, spent the '07 season in Pawtucket. You did a little bit of time in Cleveland, and now you find yourself with the Minnesota Twins. It's been some kind of ride, Craig.
Yeah, it definitely has. There were a few different times where, I thought that my baseball career had come to an end. But fortunately, everything worked out. I think, I could most easily sum up the last 4 years as whirlwind.
And Craig, the thing that boggles my mind, if you talk about going back to 2005, everywhere you've been, San Diego, Boston, Cleveland, and Minnesota, you've pitched well. Cleveland, I heard you even remark this, they really didn't give you a chance. I mean, you appeared in 7 games, I think 8 innings, but it's hard to really show what you have when you don't get a chance. But it seems like you found your niche in Minnesota. They let you pitch in 42 games this past season. You were lights out, basically, 1.63 ERA.
Yep,
the
amazing.
thing that impressed me, Craig, is that you only gave up 2 home runs. As a Minnesota Twin. Your first appearance versus the Yankees, retiring the first 5 hitters. Do you feel very comfortable in Minnesota? And what's your contract status there right now, Craig?
So my contract is renewable each year.
Okay.
That's the way all contracts work up until free agency or, the time in which an organization decides to pursue a long-term deal. But my rights are exclusive to Minnesota for the next 5 years. Would be when I'd first be eligible for free agency.
And in Minnesota right now, Craig, I was looking over their rosters, following them all year long. We had Bill Dowling on the phone.
We did have Bill,
as an interview a few months ago, the GM of the Rockets, and he talked about the Twin system, how they stress pitching, how they go about doing things. I was looking at your pitching staff. You guys got guys like Nick Blackburn and Scott Baker. The leaders of the staff here are 26 years old. Liriano's been hurt. He's only, I think, 24 years old. I think you at 27 are one of the older guys around, Craig,
Yeah.
But it's just amazing to me. The future's looking really bright on that pitching staff. Your comments about the Twins' current pitching staff?
Yeah, no, it's a pretty incredible thing to be a part of. When I think Scott Baker is the oldest. I think he's the oldest starter at 27. You were right. Yeah, myself at 27, and later in the season, having turned 28, I was a veteran on the team, which is not a role I'm used to playing. But there's definitely a lot of talented guys, a lot of guys that really understand their abilities and pitch kind of within themselves. And I think that's a huge part of the reason that we had so much success. I think it's it's an organization-wide policy. We stress getting ahead of hitters, throwing strikes, being aggressive within the zone. And I think that you can see that in every pitcher. I think as a staff, I think we led the league in fewest walks per 9 innings. We got guys that force hitters to put the ball in play. They get ahead and they challenge you. We play solid defense. We play the fundamentals of the game, and that's the reason that we were able to contend in the division despite losing, Johan Santana and Torrey Hunter.
Yeah. You're watching Monday Night Sports Talk. On the phone with us, Craig Breslow of the Minnesota Twins. We have some pictures on the screen of Craig. Craig, more about that pitching staff. You find yourself in the bullpen with some other formidable guys like Dennis Reyes, Jose Majares, and yourself, lefty setup guys. This team is really, they're looking good for the future. Are you looking forward to the new ballpark? What is it like pitching for a guy like Gardenhire?
If I can tackle those questions one at a time.
Sure.
Absolutely. It was a privilege to pitch in the Minnesota bullpen, and throughout my career, I've had the honor, the distinction of pitching in some pretty impressive bullpens. Making my debut with Trevor Hoffman, having a chance to pitch in front of Jonathan Papelbon in Boston, and then now Joe Nathan in Minnesota. I mean, those are three of probably the 4 or 5 best closures in the game. And those guys have each kind of imparted some kind of knowledge and some kind of wisdom in me, and I've sought as much advice as possible from those guys. As far as playing for Ron Gardenhire, he's definitely one of the most player-friendly, down-to-earth, approachable, honest guy, sincere, genuine guys that I've ever had the opportunity to play for. He's very honest. He cares about his players. There are times when decisions are made that don't necessarily agree with a player's personal interests, and he takes the time to explain his reasoning for doing things. And there are a lot of managers who simply are content with saying, "I'm the manager," and that's the reason. But Gardy, I think, is very cognizant of team chemistry, team camaraderie, and the trust between the coaching staff and players.
That's definitely the impression we got. Tony.
Yeah, and Craig, it's a pleasure to have you tonight. I'm going to ask you something, and this is from knocking around baseball years ago. One particular fella whom I do remember pitched in AAA and then never quite made it up to the big club, and he would always say, it's harder to pitch in AAA because not everybody can field. And what is that a true statement? And what are the differences that you're finding, like in the majors, as opposed to pitching in the minors?
There are definitely a number of differences. Obviously, sure, there's something to be said about the defense being better, there being a better understanding of the game in the big leagues. But the hitters are also better. Whereas I think the minor leagues are sometimes filled with guys that have a lot of talent or a lot of tools, but haven't necessarily put everything together yet. The big leagues are definitely consist of more of a polished and refined player. There are generally no glaring weaknesses in guys, because if there are, then they get sent back to the minor leagues. And I think my style of pitching may be more apt to succeed in the big leagues, because I'm not a guy that's going to wow you with stuff. I'm more of making hitters put the ball in play, kind of pitching to my strength. And in the big leagues, guys have tendencies. They have certain strengths, and I can kind of feed off of those, rather than facing a minor league guy that's maybe a bit more raw, but has a hard time being set up because of the fact that he's relying on kind of athletic ability over technique or acquired skill.
Understand.
I think you make a great point, Craig, because your first debut as a Twin, going against the feared Yankees,
right,
retiring 5 guys in a row. Now your normal probably hard-throwing pitcher probably wants to challenge these guys and might get burnt down the right. So it
absolutely true.
Is something. And one more thing about the Twins, Craig. We talk about Joe Mauer, how good of a hitter he is. What's it like throwing to him as a pitcher?
Joe's one of the most gifted athletes that I've ever come across. He's one of those rare guys that is going to be successful in whatever he does, because he's just that gifted. Mm-hmm. He turned down a scholarship to play quarterback at Florida State coming out of high school, to sign as the first overall pick in the draft. Having the chance to watch him work it's pretty incredible. First of all, at the plate, obviously that's what everyone talks about. Here's a guy that's 6'5" and with a sweet swing from the left-handed side, and he hits .330 and wins batting titles. But behind the plate, he's incredibly athletic. He's got great hands. He's got a cannon for an arm.
Big guy, right?
Yeah. He's 6'5", won his first Gold Glove this year. I think that obviously speaks to his defensive abilities. And he's just a very soft-spoken, calm, kind of unflappable guy. And that's got a very calming effect, I think, on such a young pitching staff.
I get that impression, Tony, about Mauer. Guys, that just aren't vocal, but you respect them because I guess because they're becoming more scarce these days. Guys that are go about their business, but it's great to hear. Craig, now I want to get over to your Strike 3 Foundation. Craig is the founder of the Strike 3 Foundation. We can put that website out there. It's www.strike3foundation.org. Something that Craig came up with in 2008.
Right.
Let me read the mission statement, Tony. The Strike 3 Foundation heightens awareness, mobilizes support, and raises funding for childhood cancer research. I guess an impetus for this, Craig, came from when your sister Leslie was diagnosed with thyroid cancer at the age of 14. It's something that was always, I guess, stayed close to you. Give us some of your thoughts about how you got this organization off the ground.
Well, exactly correct. My sister Leslie's now a 15-year thyroid cancer survivor living an unrestricted life, and at the time I was 12. She's 2 years older than me. At the time she was diagnosed, and that had a lasting impact on me. It was something that I felt strongly about. Creating some awareness for. When I'd gotten older and when I had kind of garnered the appropriate name recognition, and last off season, I just kind of decided, with the connections I had made through Yale, the Yale Alumni Network, through some of the connections with Major League Baseball, that having at the time I was playing for the Red Sox, so being a local kid playing for a local team, I figured that the time was as right as any other time would be. I called up a good friend of mine, a gentleman by the name of Joe Leza, who's the COO of the charity and handles kind of the day-to-day operations while I'm out playing, and basically gave him my ideas, and we've run with it. 2 weekends ago, the 8th of November, we hosted our first major event. It was called the First Pitch Celebrity Gala, and the event was a resounding success. We held it at Woodbridge Country Club in Woodbridge, Connecticut, sold out the venue. Peter Gammons was there. Gino Auriemma was there. The Indians closer, Jensen Lewis, came. Joe McEwing, a longtime Met. Our keynote address was given by a gentleman named Jeffrey Ma, who was the real-life character that the movie 21 in the book Bringing Down the House, the MIT blackjack team, was written about. He was the real-life basis for that, and gave an incredibly entertaining and interesting presentation about some of his blackjack experiences and counting cards and those kinds of things. And we had a successful live and silent auction. Major League Baseball donated a bunch of memorabilia. The Red Sox did a ton of stuff, a lot of the local golf courses and businesses. And I think all in all, we raised over $50,000 for pediatric cancer research, which in this economy, and given that it was our first event,
was pretty darn good.
That was great, Craig. That was my next question, how that whole thing down at the Woodbridge Country Club turned out. But that's great to hear. And please give my regards to Joe Leza. I'm a Derby native myself, so that's great to hear. But we got about a minute left. Tony, one more question for Craig.
And Craig, in your advocation for pediatric cancer research, do you feel that there are any therapies or any research that perhaps now isn't being done that you would like to, or you'd like to have the foundation get involved in funding, perhaps areas that maybe aren't getting enough research at this point?
For our first event, we partnered with CureSearch, which is in itself a partnership between the National Childhood Cancer Federation and the Children's Oncology Group. And the Children's Oncology Group is a 200 pediatric oncology wards at hospitals throughout the country. However, going forward, we do kind of like the autonomy of being able to allocate up the assets as we see fit, and some things that we're planning are potentially funding grants. Another thing that we're looking to get into is meeting with the Yale University, who's set on spending a significant amount of resources on their oncology department. And I think because of the development, it's an exciting time for us as well as the medical community in this area, because we can have a profound effect. Whether it's funding, staffing physicians or equipment, or even something as simple as enhancing the playrooms in the children's oncology wards at Yale. Those are some things that we're kind of tossing around.
We wish you all the luck in the world
great work, my
with
friend.
it,
Keep
Craig.
it up.
Again, folks, the web address www.strike3foundation.org. Craig, we want to wish you luck with the organization and with the Twins. Obviously, we'll be watching you closely next season, and please keep in touch. And thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you so much, Craig.